The Appalachian Mountains are teeming with wildlife and mystery. Known for its hiking trails and natural beauty, these mountains hide some very sinister undertones. It is a place where the sinister can easily hide. Maybe it means people who hunt other people. Maybe it means spirits that are supposed to be nothing more than legend. Maybe it means monsters who prowl the mountain-studded landscape. Today, we're exploring the hauntingly true experiences survivors have shared of the horrors in the Appalachian Mountains. If you have a story and you want it narrated, share it with us at darkstories.org, or come on over to help us put together our future video, Unexpectedly Disturbing Scenes from 90s TV Shows, rated PG or lower. Just click that link in the pinned comment below. So far, we have 2 intriguing entries. Now then, you're not gonna need your hiking gear. That would just be a bunch of empty calories for the thing that eats you. My brother is my hero. From Paul. Before my brother saved me, he wasn't such an active person, but I enjoyed nothing more than him chatting and giving me life advice. Just a little bit about him. He was a Marine, a big shot finance guy, drank a lot of whiskey, and a general tough guy. I wouldn't want to fight him, even though he had to use a cane towards the end. I can always tell if I should date a boy based on how much fear is in their eyes while I gleefully introduce them to my brother. Only one has made the cut so far. The others usually end up making some excuse as to why they don't want to come to my family outings with me. But based on that look, I always knew. Some girls would have been offended by that a family member would make boys run away. But not me. I always knew he could just tell. My brother could just tell when people had the best interests in mind or not. He loved me unconditionally, and from what I could tell about other people with siblings, this isn't a very common thing. Nothing and no one has ever had a chance to hurt me, and I owe that to him. He has recently passed on, but I know I should tell this story in his honor. He and I used to love to go camping and hiking together. I would do anything with him considering he was 10 years my elder, and I felt that he had a lot to show me. One time we decided to do a semi-large part of the Appalachian Trail, nearest our New York home at the time. Most of the trail at the time was off limits due to the weather, but we planned to do 12 miles in a single day. It was great for 12-year-old me that he allowed me to go with him, even though he knew it would take a much longer time. I was overjoyed. We talked, we laughed. I laid out all my problems in the open, and he, without hesitation or really trying to think about it, sorted them out and put everything into a different and more convenient perspective. Everything was going great on this trip, until I felt his hand on my back tugging on my pack. He didn't say anything, but I could tell that something was wrong. He usually wouldn't do something like that without saying anything. When I looked at him, I saw him looking off into the distance. I followed his gaze over to what he was looking at. I then whispered, "Is that what I think it is?" He whispered back, "No." The dark figure heard us and turned. My brother then said, "Don't run, just get behind me." I only got a glance of it. It wasn't until I approached it that I knew what I saw wasn't what I thought it was. My brother was 6'4", and I knew something bad was about to go down when he unstrapped his large hunting knife from behind him, then stood in what I can only describe as a boxing-style stance. The creature approached us. My first thought of it being a bear was entirely wrong. It wasn't even something I'd ever seen on TV. It wasn't something I'd ever heard of. It wasn't something I would even think could exist. It stood over my brother, and I got a good look of its face. It had massive teeth, soulless, dead eyes. Its shoulders were far too broad, and it seemed to be intent on hurting us. My brother never broke eye contact, and his head began tilting higher and higher as this thing came closer. He was screaming at it, trying to scare it away, to no effect. He knew he had to play aggressive, and it took me a second to realize that he was actually yelling at me. Instructions. He was telling me that when he swings his knife, I had better run the other way and get in the truck. He said that his keys were in his pocket, and that I needed to reach for them. When I get there, I was to hold the horn down until he came. Finally, he said to not look back. I didn't question it for a second, but it did hit me quite hard. He was cursing at me, and I'd never heard him say words like that before. But I obeyed him. I reached into his pocket and got the keys. Then I was ready to run. He didn't swing the knife until the thing was within a few feet from him, and that's when I got the best look at it. It was a hulking creature, more than twice the size of my brother in every way, width, height, weight. Its muscles were rippling across its body. I almost began to cry, but I swallowed it down. Suddenly, I saw my brother pull back the knife and begin to launch himself at it. I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard angry screams and cursing and growling. But the only thing I can really remember was my brother screaming with more ferocity than I knew he was capable of. I did just as he told me. I ran to the truck. I screamed for help all the way there. I honked the horn the moment I got inside. It caught the attention of a few different families, and they in turn got the rangers to come check out the situation. Later on, I was at the hospital crying my eyes out. They told me my brother and I needed to give a statement, and they brought me to his room. He was an absolute mess. IV tubes everywhere, red fluid on the floor, scrapes and deep gashes all over his body, and one eye, I couldn't tell if it was gone or just really badly bruised. They asked us what happened. I haven't said a word to anyone at that moment, not even to my parents. I see my brother smile at me, and he kind of just winks, and he mutters the word, bear. From what I've been told, there was a mess at the scene when they found him. He was hobbling toward the rangers when he saw them at a slow pace. There was no sign of that creature, but I can tell you now with all truth and honesty I have, it wasn't a bear. Whatever it was, it's still in the Appalachian Mountains, and if it wasn't for my brother, I would be dead. My brother is my hero. The Thing, from Psychotic Wisdom. It was a cold October morning in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina. The leaves were crisp and dew and had already formed from last night. They crystallized upon everything, as if it all had been frozen. I had my way too expensive tent set up, and was aggravated as I already found a tear in it. Now, a lot of people may be confused as to why someone would be camping in such freezing weather, but I was there for a good reason. Something had been eating and scaring my animals for God knows how long, and I've grown extremely tired of it. I was here to see if I could find it, to at least see what was terrorizing my farm. I have a little farm with sheep and cows. They're my pride and joy, and I love taking care of them. And when something began to eat and hurt and scare them, it infuriated me. It all started about 2 years ago, when some of the animals began to disappear, and I needed to find out why. People think I'm crazy for not just brushing it off my shoulders and thinking it's a bear or something else more common. Well, if you would have seen the weird tracks it left, then you wouldn't think I'm so crazy. The tracks were like human tracks, but then again at the same time they were different. They were longer and wider than a person's, with a different number of digits. It gave me chills imagining what kind of monster could be putting my animals in danger. So there I was, out in the Appalachians camping and following these tracks. Maybe it was an insane idea to camp alone when something dangerous was out there, but I didn't really have the time to wait for anyone else to join me. Night was falling, so I fixed my bed and hoped that it wouldn't rain. As I slowly drifted to sleep that night, I awoke to an eerie sound. It was like something being dragged in the dirt right across from where my tent was. Without hesitation, I grabbed whatever I had beside me as a weapon. I clutched it hard into my hands until my knuckles turned white. With the fading light from the embers in my campfire, I could see the shadow being cast across my tent, which meant it was much closer than I thought. It was a very tall, bony shadow. It was quite slender. My adrenaline was kicking in big time. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, trying my best not to give myself away, I began to peek through the small rip in the tent. Immediately, a terrible stench hit me. It was like rot. The smell you're ambushed with if you left the meat in your fridge to rot for weeks and then finally opened the door. It was so horrid, I could barely hold back a gag. I may be crazy, but I was not crazy enough to get out of my tent and check out whatever that thing was. Quietly, I laid back down and I waited for the creature to pass. Once it did, and once the smell finally left, I went to sleep. Maybe that's what happens when the adrenaline wears off. The following day, I woke up hoping that whatever that thing was gone still. As I unzipped the tent, I looked around a bit before finally stepping out. That thing had definitely been dragging something. Dirt was drug up from the weight of the object, and there was red fluid in the dirt, a reminder of what I heard last night. And then I saw a piece of wool and realized that thing had probably taken another of my sheep. As the anger built up inside, I reminded myself that I would find this thing and put a stop to it. I began to follow the dragging trail. The red fluid stopped at a large cave dug into the ground. It was lined with old brown pine straw. I wanted to go in, but I knew that would be a bad idea, especially if that's what the creature called its home. I turned around and began to walk back to my tent. I realized I should come back with something I can protect myself better with, as I'd stupidly left everything at the tent. As I'm walking back, everything's more quiet than it was before. The birds have stopped singing, and the wind had even died down. It reminded me to be cautious. As they say, when it all goes quiet, there is a predator around. I slowed my walking down, because whatever it was, I did not want it to hear me. As I continue to walk, I hear a twig crack nearby, and I know for sure that that wasn't me. I slow down and slouch, hoping whatever it was doesn't see me. My heart is practically beating out of my chest at this point. I begin to stand up again, but as soon as I'm all the way up, the creature from last night is standing right in front of me. I've never felt such fear or surprise. I'm frozen there. I'm completely defenseless, looking at something otherworldly. Let me describe it to you as best I can. It's almost human, but not quite. Its skin is a deep gray, like it's lifeless. It's a few feet taller than I am, and I'm nearly 6 feet tall, and its teeth were sharp like daggers. Its hands hang low down to what appear to be knees. It's something straight from a nightmare, and it was only a few feet away from me. I stand completely still, trying not to even breathe. The smell is too awful, though. I'm having trouble keeping my breakfast down. I grab a stick nearby me and I stare back at the creature. But then everything becomes blurry, then black. When I wake up, I feel like I've been drugged. Maybe it's my mind playing tricks on me. But then I look around. I realize I'm nowhere near my campsite. And if I had to guess, to my horror, I was in that thing's little hole. The one that I was trying to avoid. There were bones everywhere as far as I could see. They were scattered across the floor and lined the walls. I didn't see the creature itself anywhere, and I prayed that it was either gone or much deeper in the cave. As I began to stand up, I suddenly fall. I feel weak, and I have no idea how long I've been out. I begin to hit my legs, pinch them, trying to get the feeling and blood going, so I could leave this godforsaken hole. I was never prepared for something like this. I was panicking big time. Fear of the dark, fear of claustrophobia, fear of that thing being anywhere at any point in time. It had obviously dragged me in here, so it would certainly be back for me. That's when I began to hear the gurgling sound coming from deeper in the cave. My legs are still asleep, but they're getting closer. I'm desperate to stand up now, but I continue to fall every time I try. Closer and closer the sounds come, and I have no way to escape, no way to get further away from them. Then the gurgling sounds stop right behind me. I know it's there. I know it's looking at me, watching me try to escape in futility. I turn and face it, and I'm horrified to see it smiling like it's a person. Then something happened that I still have trouble believing was real. It pointed at me and spoke. Like me. I remember thinking, what does that mean? It could tell that I was obviously afraid of it, and that's something you never want from a predator. It reaches out and grabs me by my ankle before I could yank away. My reaction times are terrible. Probably because my legs are asleep. I can't even kick or struggle away from it. Then it stops, turns, lunges at my arm and sinks its teeth into me. It hurts like hell. Somehow, I'm able to pick myself up. I yank myself away from it, and I begin to run out of that cave. When I turn to look, it's running deeper into the cave instead of coming after me. Is it done with me? I run straight out of there. I check my arm, but it apparently didn't break skin. But how in the world had it hurt so much? I continue on, back to my tent to grab my phone. I knew no one would believe me, but I didn't expect them to. What matters now is that I needed help. I find my phone and dial 911. I speak to the operator and tell them where I'm at. I try to keep myself awake, but I'm still feeling wrong and woozy. I pass out again, only to wake up in the hospital now to a nurse, asking me if I'm okay. For a second there, I forgot everything that happened, but as waking up usually does, it all came rushing back into my mind. My eyes widened, and my arm began to hurt. I was told that they brought me in with apparent hydration problems, that I passed out from dehydration. Maybe I was in that cave longer than I thought. As I lay there, waiting for when I could be released, I couldn't get that thing's words out of my head. Like me, it had said. What did it mean? Was it simply intelligent enough to know that it looked human? Or was it a warning of something else to come? I'm horrified by it, and to this day I have trouble sleeping thinking about it. I keep an eye out on my animals still, but for some reason, the attacks have stopped, and I haven't seen the creature since. Still, I wish I had never stepped out into those woods. Our last story today comes from an episode on January 20th about 10 humanoid sightings. It is the only other Appalachian mountain story I could find, and it was the last story in that video, so I figured it'd be a good fit here. I hope you enjoy it. The Lightning Figure, from FerrumBruti. I was 13 years old, and I took a ride with my grandmother down to the cove off the backside of Wythe County outside of Scrooge's, where the Walmart and theater are at now. We were riding in her blue Ford Taurus to pick up my great aunt Alice from her place. It was cold, it was the evening, and it was raining as well. The lightning was illuminating the clouds overhead. I was never frightened by weather or thunder and lightning. It's a common thing you find in Southwest Virginia. We had pulled into the family farmland after pulling off the back road. The path to the farm was dirt and gravel and muddy as well. It sat back on the hollow of two peaks behind it. As we pulled up, my grandmother turned off the car and waited with me inside for Aunt Alice to come out. I was bored, and like any curious teenager, I looked out the back passenger window. I was just trying to pass the time and let my mind wander. I had just been getting over my other grandmother's passing, so I felt a good way to get over that was to spend time with my only remaining grandmother. As I was looking across the road, I noticed the thunder and lightning become both more illuminating and intense as well. My grandmother leaned close to comfort me. "Don't worry, Tim. She should be out soon, and we'll be on our way then." For a brief moment, I felt comforted, but as I looked closer to the hilltop across the road, I noticed something strange. What appeared at first as a midnight blue soon changed to a slight royal navy blue color. I panicked and screamed for my grandma. Quickly, she snapped to attention and looked out the window. She looked and saw nothing to worry about and reassured me. She said she was right there and nothing bad was going to happen. I took this to heart. Soon enough, Aunt Alice showed up with an umbrella and cane. She was hunched over in her fragile state. She walked her way out with that fiery spirit of hers, and she climbed into the car. Aunt Alice greeted me and patted me on the head. The two decided we would wait in the car for the rain to pass, if possible, before departing to go to her home back in town. 20 minutes had passed since my aunt got in the car, and again my mind began to wander. I was now just looking up at the hilltop nearby. Once again, the sky lit up like it did that last time, freaking me out, and my grandmother said it was nothing to worry about once more. But suddenly, after my grandma looked out of her window, she shouted, "Alice, look!" All of us turned toward the ridgetop. At first, I thought it was lightning, but it was in a ball sort of shape. It had a greenish-blue haze about it, but once the haze faded around it, it began to swell and pulse until at that point, the outline took a shape. I began to choke with fright, not sure what I was looking at, but at the same time, I was in awe. All my great aunt and my grandmother could do was pause and glance at each other, then look back up to the ridge. The figure walked in a pace almost tense, anxious, yet determined. It startled me. Lightning is energy. It doesn't take form like a person, and it doesn't have intelligence. I saw my Aunt Alice grab her Bible and the two prayed, and I joined them. From that point, the figure vanished. My aunt and grandma both decided with this tense moment gone, it was time we left. As she started the car and pulled out, we went down the hill and toward the gate. I quickly got out to open it, then close it after the car pulled through. Then I rushed back in and hopped inside. We would drive further down the old road, talking about what we saw. Little did we know that it wasn't over. My Aunt Alice alerted us again. With a gasp, she said, "There it is." At the top of the ridge where it paralleled with the back road, it seemed to be rushing side by side with my grandma's car. It was that figure with no face, no expression, just an outline of energy. It kept pace with us. My grandmother basically floored it, and the engine roared to life. Normally sweet and well-mannered, my grandma was now done with this. The car picked up speed, and we screeched to a halt, seeing a tree fall over in front of us. The figure was behind us on the ridge now, but it was catching up fast. I saw my grandmother grab tightly on the wheel and close her eyes before screaming, "Just leave us alone!" After that, there was nothing. The thunder, the rain, the tree in front of us in the road, and us in the blue Ford Taurus, everything went calm again, and the figure was gone. A driver happened along the scene and helped us move the tree. Afterwards, we got back in and went home. That night, I don't think any of us were getting any rest. My parents would later make it back after spending some time at my mom's high school reunion. My grandmother and aunt would explain the story to them, but they were too tired to care. It had been a long night, I guess. I haven't been back up that cove in a long time, not even after both my grandma and my great-aunt passed away. Yet at the same time, I make sure when going down a back road, I know what the weather's going to be, and I'm always mindful of my surroundings. Some things in life are meant to be left alone and not pursued. This was one of those things. These mountains provide the ultimate hunting grounds for the most strange and bizarre beasts, creatures that continue to elude us for one reason or another. Sure, the Appalachian Mountains are great for hiking and camping and making memories with your dear family. But what do those memories really matter if your family ends up in the belly of a monstrous nightmare? When you visit these ominous mountains, be sure to go prepared. 1 minute you may be having the time of your life, and the next you may not have a life at all. Good night. I'm sorry these episodes have been so short on new stories. Ever since my website was attacked with malware, it still hasn't recovered. We've moved to a new website, but I'm waiting on my new web host to transfer all your submissions and stories to the new one. That could take some time. Until then, I'm kind of short on new stories, and I'm trying my best to get out content as usual. Thank you for your patience. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget that you can share your stories at darkstories.org for a chance to have them narrated, or join us and help us make a new video by posting your ideas and suggestions. If you want to support the show, you can do so by donating at patreon.com/darknessprevails or by shopping our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous episode about 4 urban exploration horror stories. The Cocker Spaniel says, I am firstly. I thought this said I am thirsty, which would be a really pointless thing to say on YouTube, unless you knew a certain horror narrator who would send you a bottle of Gatorade he already drank from. Oh yeah. Scardro says, I could never explore an abandoned place. Well, if you walk inside, it's no longer abandoned, is it? So no one really ever explores abandoned places, technically. But I totally see what you mean. Abandoned places are spookfests. The Forlorn Bat says, urban exploration stories are always fun. I've always wanted to give it a try myself. Problem is, I am a country person, not a city dweller. Well, technically, urban exploration covers anything that's abandoned, whether it's in the middle of a forest or in the middle of a bustling city. So go out in the woods, my friend. Find yourself a spooky old house or an oddly placed staircase. Pagan Thought says, have you heard of the Beast of Busco? It seems like a great topic for some stories. Though a giant snapping turtle isn't really that scary, is it? Heck yeah, it is. Those things can take off fingers. I'll definitely be looking this up. Thank you, my pagan friend. And Megan Bender says, So excited to watch. I have pop sockets that say stay creepy, so that even when I'm not listening, I'm still thinking of your channel. Thank you for your time in making these videos. I appreciate the support, and I wish I could sell my own pop sockets. My wife just recently talked me into getting my own, and it's pretty cool and convenient. And it's kept me from dropping my phone in the bathtub several times. Yes, I take baths. I'm a dirty boy. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. They're the greatest kind of people. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.